Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. NFL Week 3 injuries going way too hard. We got to turn them off. It's been a tough week on that front, so we're going to try to figure out which waiver wire picks you can throw right into your lineups and break down every single game on the slate this week from a fantasy perspective. Let's get it rolling. Welcome on in. This is the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. For those joining us on the YouTube live stream, got my stately App State shirt on. They play this evening. I think that the the Yosef logo, maybe the finest in all of college football. So repping App State this evening. But this, of course, a fantasy football podcast for NFL. So we are going to dig right in to NFL Week 3. Let's kick things off, Mario, shall we, with Jets Patriots, the Thursday night football game, another AFC East clash gracing our television sets on this fine Thursday evening. We've seen this number come down a little bit despite the Jets winning last week. It was Jets -7 on the look ahead, but the Patriots, despite losing last week, did look tough, kind of a similar blueprint to what we saw week 1 against the Bengals, tough run. But their passing defense looked a little bit shaky, of course, against Geno Smith in week 2. They end up losing that game in overtime. So looking ahead here to this Jets-Pats matchup, I think the big question I have for you when it comes to the Jets side of things is, how real was the Braylon Allen thing? And secondly, will there be a second pass catcher to actually emerge in this offense? Obviously, Allen Lazard did well week 1, but are we going to start to see Mike Williams start to come along? Is Tyler Conklin going to finally get involved? What are we looking at here?
I think it's clear the Jets want to get some amount of usage toward Braylon Allen, and he has some amount of ability, probably a lot of ability. The whole issue with him, my opinion anyway, was that he's just too slow to stick over big, usage volume from the running back position. I think there's a lot of reason to believe Braylon Allen runs a 4.8 40-yard dash, maybe a little worse than that. I've mentioned the reasons why before. Is go look at his tape against Purdue over the years, basically, and see who catches him from behind, and then check their 40-yard numbers. So particularly when Braylon Allen's big plays keep occurring untouched, I think you got to imagine going forward he's going to get touched eventually, and he's not necessarily going to bowl people over the way he would playing against like Illinois or Indiana or something like, or Purdue for that matter. Indeed, a lot of those plays against Purdue, it starts with him running people over and then creating about 10, 15 yards of distance and then getting caught from behind anyway. And still a good play. And he's got some amount of skill. But if you look at those Titans touchdowns, the usage is clearly intended there, and they're going to probably keep going to him some amount. But I only question, when he starts getting hit eventually, do the results stay good enough for them to stay so enthusiastic about the whole thing? Or do they start to say like, oh, that sucks. We kind of needed a first down there and we didn't get it. He's going to get touched eventually. You can't run a 4.8 and just keep running untouched for touchdowns. That's not how it works. So I think Allen is clearly a good pass blocker and probably has good hands, and obviously he's powerful. But if you run a 4.8, you're necessarily, you need to break so many tackles to create any yardage from scrimmage that at the very least, you're going to have a diminishing return. I think he runs hard off the bench, but if he goes against a faster or even if Amani Hooker took a correct angle against the Titans, does anyone care so much what he did there? Because then he's finishing with like 17 fewer yards and one less touchdown. And it's easier to look at it as just like he got a couple garbage time touchdowns against a gas defense. So the Jets have a defense and the run, intentions of their own to get back in a script where Allen can take on a gas defense. And indeed, maybe he'll be something of their preferred closer back if they have big leads. But My opinion is that Braylon Allen is only playing ahead of Isaiah Davis because of the political pressure of Joe Douglas having spent a higher draft capital on Braylon Allen and kind of leaking to the press all these hype things about him. But if the returns diminish, things get reevaluated quickly. As far as the Jets offense in general, yeah, Mike Williams can't stay down forever. Garrett Wilson is going to get going one of these days. And I don't know. I think Aaron Rodgers will pick it up. He's done enough good things. Excuse me. That excuse me. I think we can call Rodgers' slow start a combination of tough matchups and a 40-year-old working back from an Achilles tear.
Right. We've got the short rest detail here, of course, but the Jets have been on the road the first 2 weeks of the season. They return home this evening. Big underdogs have done extremely well this year, 6 points and higher. They're 8-0 against the spread. I do tend to think that changes this evening. I do have the Jets by a touchdown in this one. And then Patriots side, is it just going to continue to be just quickly, just Ramondre or Hunter Henry is kind of comprising the entirety of that offense? Is there any hope for the DeMario Douglases of the world out there?
With Brissett, apparently not. Apparently they're going to do like the two tight end, or a fullback often kind of thing. So it maybe is the best competitive model for the Patriots right now, especially if they don't want to damage May physically and psychically. But there are certain definite structural limitations that come with that, and they pretty much can only run or throw to Hunter Henry. Is maybe Jalen Polk in time. But I hope that changes because Douglas is good. It's a shame that he can't get the ball.
I agree. Although this does look okay for my Hunter Henry heavy portfolio.
Henry's
I've got
good.
a lot of him as my tight end too. But speaking of psychic damage, we've got the Giants playing on Sunday against the Browns. Browns giving 6.5 at home. Browns have, I think, like 3 total touchdowns thus far this season. The Giants lost kind of that fluky game a week ago where Daniel Jones actually had a clean box score. Malik Neighbors looked super impressive, of course, but they ended up losing by the Nick Whalen dubbed field goal raid offense there by the Commanders. What are we looking at in this game? Anyone sneaky that might actually do a little bit better than expectations here with the over-under being just 38.5?
This is the Giants game, correct? Sorry.
Correct, yes.
Okay. I'm not convinced Deshaun Watson is any better. If you look at how the Jaguars have been run, it's not impressive. It's hard to give the Jaguars any benefit of the doubt, and given the way that otherwise past 2 years for Watson have gone, I'm willing to give the Jaguars credit for Watson's otherwise decent enough game last week. With that said, the Giants defense has been really disappointing to me anyway. I thought it would be a little better. You got a guy like Dexter Lawrence who's pretty much a 3-man front in himself, and they got at least 3 good edge defenders. Deontay Banks should have been something by now. Adoree Jackson shouldn't be like a total bum. Cordell Flott shouldn't be a total bum, but I guess the loss of Xavier McKinney maybe hurt a lot, and not that that's shocking. They should have seen that coming. But yeah, you look at Hard Knocks, and Joe Shane was like, "Yeah, we lost Xavier McKinney, so I guess we got to trade for Brian Burns now," which is not the way you want to run a team. You want to have a vision and not just respond to leaks that are sprung from your own negligence with like overspending and desperation. So the Giants might just be so much of a mess. Even though I think Brian Dable's a good coach, maybe they just cannot get it together this year, and maybe the Browns are just, in comparison, pretty stable. I don't know, even though they're kind of a mess in their own right. But it's just really, really difficult to imagine Daniel Jones doing very well against any defense, but certainly the Browns are like lower on the list than you'd like them to go against.
So when it comes down to like a Devin Singletary who ran well a week ago in Washington, is he someone that you think is like flex viable this week?
Probably. It's one of those things though. because we can only be so certain about one team beating another or having a positive game script over another, Singletary being the kind of running back who has a good stake to a pretty high claim of the usage in the Giants offense. If the Giants do a little bit better than at least I expect, then Singletary would all of a sudden be in a pretty good position to have usage and maybe even be part of why the Giants would win the game if it were to turn out that way. But I don't know. I would rather have Singletary against a weaker defense. But if you got injuries and if things just are falling that way, I wouldn't fret having to start Singletary either.
I wouldn't either. I feel okay about him, and I think the usage is good enough. And I've seen a lot of advanced metrics this week that really like the way that he's been performing thus far. I think it's going to be a low scoring enough game to where no matter what,
Yeah.
the Giants won't have to abandon the run. If this was a more explosive offense they were going against, maybe
you're right.
you get a little bit concerned about that. But I think this sets up okay. I think I kind of like the Giants to cover here, actually. I think the Browns are pretty rickety, especially offensively. I think the defense is still pretty nasty, but
the defense needs to do the work if they're going to cover that 6.5.
Big time. Yeah, I think, it hurts me to say this as someone who's confident in the Giants this week against the spread. We're going to need no turnovers going for touchdowns from the Giants, and it's hard to ask for that 2 weeks in a row. Do have a couple of interesting questions I wanted to jump to real quick before a quick message. KJ wants to know, better starting option this week, Mike Evans, who gets the tough matchup, of course, against Patrick Surtain, or Juwan Jennings, or Deontay Johnson?
Unless we have to start two of these, it's Evans clearly for me, and I guess Deontay would be second for me. But even if Mike Evans sees a lot of Surtain, and he very well might, the Buccaneers, if they're going to run so many as 55 plays, they kind of just need to start getting the ball to Evans at some point. And that ECU corner, Jaquan McMillan or whatever, I'm pretty sure he's done a pretty good job as a slot corner for the Broncos. So it's not as if Godwin has so much easier of a matchup that, Evans just gets phased out. But if you don't like Evans for whatever reason, I would put Deontay second, but I'd probably just go with Evans.
I think I'll be interested in Juwan Jennings in deeper leagues, starting him as like a wide receiver 3 or flex this week, but I can't start him.
He can't scale up that much. He pretty much only plays slot and even tight end. He plays more than boundary receiver for the 49ers, which makes sense because he runs a 4.72 or something like that.
Yeah, he's not the most fleet of foot. I like the way that he plays football. He's very tough, but
he's basically like a small move tight end, and he's good at it. It's just you can't put a move tight end on the boundary against a serious boundary corner that often. But if you got to start Jennings in some other league, I wouldn't worry about it. It's just Mike Evans is one of those dudes that I need a lot of reasons to put him on the bench.
Yeah, me as well, and definitely with these two guys, that's not enough for me to put Evans on the bench. And then, would you sell high on Devin Achane right now? I think that he comes off the big game last week. We're looking at pretty rickety offense here for Miami for as long as Tua is out and Skylar Thompson's under center. But could that just move more of that usage consistently to Achane? I know that, we were just talking about scaling up, and Achane's not a guy that you really want to be relying on to put 20 carries on every single week. So is he a sell high option to you?
I guess it depends on what the sell high actually entails, because if you're just selling him and taking whatever the highest offer is, that's not necessarily selling high. I don't know what it would. We don't know enough about how the rankings are going to shake out over this year to know who would be worth it. But to me, Achane is something like, at the very least, a top, 40 player. So I'd probably, just out of the principle of wanting to rip off the other team or whoever I trade with, I'd probably want at least a top 30 player, whatever that might mean to you. But it's hard to know what that means to everybody.
No, exactly. So it's, feel it out. Feel out, what that level of return that you're getting. If you're looking for a receiver, I wonder if I could get like a Rashee Rice or something in return for Devin Achane. I feel like that's a fine enough line of demarcation. Before we get on to the rest of the Sunday slate, we do have a message from our friends over at Underdog. We're proud to partner with Underdog Fantasy for the NFL season. Underdog is the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and it's also the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. In addition to their popular best ball contest, Underdog also offers great DFS pick'em games. Pick whether your favorite players will have a higher or lower stat total in this week's game for your chance to win big. You can win up to 1,000 times your money in a single night by picking between 2 and 8 players to build a pick'em entry. For me this week, if I'm looking at the board over at Underdog, one that I'm definitely looking at just because the number is so tantalizingly low, I think I like the higher for one Brock Purdy at 226.5 passing yards against the Rams. I think that basically they would have to be completely blowing out the Rams for them to have Purdy
rained out. Something.
Yeah, I mean, it can technically rain from the side of SoFi Stadium.
We're seen right if that happens. We called it, but
that's
also
right.
if he has a good game, you're right too.
I've actually been to SoFi Stadium while it was pouring during the national championship game, and one section over there was a bunch of rain getting in. It was pretty funny, but I do like the higher for Brock Purdy this week as it stands. Sign up with RWNFL to claim your free pick plus first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Visit underdogfantasy.com or find them in the App Store. And don't forget to register with my promo code RWNFL to claim your free pick plus that first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. You got to be 18 or older. 21 or older, actually, if you're in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 or older if you're in Alabama or Nebraska, and present in a state where Underdog operates. Terms apply. Are you concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. If you're in Arizona, call up 1-800-NEXT-STEP. That's 1-800-639-8783 or text NEXT STEP to 53342. If you're in New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 is that Hope line number in New York. We're on to Indianapolis versus the Bears. We've got the Colts as 1.5 point favorites. The Colts have really been vulnerable against the run this year. The Bears have not really been able to generate much on the ground. Does that change this week?
I don't know. I feel like week 1, the Colts' run game struggles are explained by what Gus Bradley, the defensive coordinator, said, which is like, we sold out against the pass because we were so scared of CJ Stroud and, Nico Collins, all those guys, that we pretty much cut loose Joe Mixon. So if that's an explanation for week 1, then it need not, bear out the rest of the year. Week 2, I think, is a combination of Matt LaFleur putting Gus Bradley in the blender and also just kind of the Packers offense being built as it is to running well, and, showing that they can run well against maybe most or all defenses. Also, DeForest Buckner having the injury going in. He didn't practice at all last week, and then he, I think, left the game. So DeForest Buckner is one of the very best defensive players in the league. Even he doesn't get much mention of it, but he's a total monster, just barely below the Chris Jones tier, in my opinion. Not as disruptive, but he's very structurally important for the Colts. So if he's missing, even if Grover Stewart's on the field, the Colts' run defense is just all of a sudden a lot worse. So if, Buckner being out, maybe that opens up something more. And, maybe Swift can get something going. But I think in the meantime, even if Gus Bradley's a bad defensive coordinator nowadays, Shane Waldron, Matt Eberflus just seem like a couple clowns to me. It's not that difficult to make the Bears look better than they've been to this point. And you would look at Eberflus and Waldron and think like, God, they're working with impossible conditions. It's so hard to make Caleb Williams and DJ Moore look any good. The poor guys. So I don't know. I've pretty much lost faith in the Bears coaching staff. I think Ryan Poles even looks like a bigger clown for putting up with these idiots. And I think Shane Steichen is a good coach who made bad decisions last week. And I don't expect Shane Steichen to keep making bad decisions. So give me the Colts, I guess.
I think I'm with you there. I think that the Bears, that offensive line looks like it's going to be an issue throughout
It's
the
the same
season.
as last year. It just looks a lot worse, right? It's just these people running the team don't know what they're doing. So unless Caleb Williams stages a successful mutiny, I don't know what there is to do about it other than, wait until these buffoons get fired. And Ryan
Yeah,
Poles may well like them for that utility because he seems to have the big vision in mind is like, oh, sorry, we had that bad coach. We'll just replace him with this good guy now that Caleb is back and we got another high pick, 3 years in a row.
yeah. Right now, the Bears kind of look like that Ferrari meme, like sitting in the driveway of a dilapidated house, akin to the meme that Jalen Rager put on his Instagram, where
They
it's
look
like,
like they don't practice. Honestly, they look like they haven't
yeah,
practiced yet, in like it's OTAs, and they have to play in week 1 all of a sudden. It's crazy.
yeah. So it's going to take a little bit for the Bears to get going. Moving on to one of the more interesting games, in my opinion, of the week, the Texans going into Minnesota to face the surprising 2-0 Minnesota Vikings. The Texans are 2-point favorites in this one. The over-under set at 46. What's catching your eye from this one?
Well, the Vikings are probably the most well-coached team in the league in terms of like overachieving through 2 weeks. And maybe them and the Saints, I guess.
Yeah.
But the Vikings, their roster sucks. There is no reason for them to be 2-0 right now. But Brian Flores has pretty much been out of his mind the first 2 weeks as a defensive coordinator. I mean, those corners cannot cover anybody, and you would just think the exact opposite watching the tape so far. That probably changes a little bit against Stroud here, but I don't know. I guess we'll see. It's fair to suggest the Vikings defense might finish this year as one of the better in the league purely on the strength of Flores and his leadership, but I still think Slowick's really good, and I definitely think the Texans are a more talented offense than the Vikings are defense. The Vikings offense versus the Texans defense is tougher for me to think through because I don't really know, other than the Texans being probably one of the best run defenses in the league, which they also were last year. I don't know that I believe in Lassiter all that much at corner. I believe in him in the first 10 yards or so. It seems like he's great at that, Rondé Barber, Donnie Abraham kind of corner play, but he runs like a 4.6 and he's not tall and he's kind of skinny. I'm not convinced he can cover downfield all that well, but if the Vikings are without both of their first 2 receivers, then what is the latest on Jefferson? Sorry, I should have looked that up.
I think he's going to be all right from the last that I heard, but we can work on.
Addison seems a little sketchy to me still, and limited practice for Jefferson, so he'll probably be there. Jefferson, you love in fantasy no matter what because I think he's the best receiver, but he also if he's getting like 38% of the Vikings targets, it's like Darnold can throw for as little as 170 yards, and Jefferson can still make a pretty useful game. So it's hard to write off the Vikings, even though certainly at the beginning of the year I would have said the Texans win this like 42-10 or something.
Right. I think that's reflected in the line. That this I'm sure looked a lot different when the first number was posted. The Texans being this super ascendant team. They were up as high as 4-point favorites before Sunday's results poured in, and then obviously things have changed
I'd
since
still
then.
take
So I'm
that,
expecting a
but
close game. Yeah, they just have to win by a field goal. So I like that. Let's go Eagles Saints. This one also fascinating. The Saints, like you were saying, one of the big surprises in the league thus far. Whereas they were just completely static offensively in years past under was Carmichael. Now they have the progeny of Gary Kubiak, I believe, Clint, and he's got the boys moving. And he's got Khalil Shakir looking like a league winner thus far. Alvin Kamara, he seems totally rejuvenated. It's been awesome to see how he's played through the first couple of weeks. He's one of my favorites, especially when things are going good. So that's been fun. The Eagles, Monday night, there were a lot of fraud allegations about the Eagles, after the way that their season ended last year. They come out week one, they look good, but they had A.J. Brown cooking. Saquon Barkley looked great against the Packers. Didn't look terrible until that big play on Monday night. But Eagles, I still have the lingering concerns about how they're run and Sirianni generally. And you're making the point on Monday night that they were just having Hurts throw it too much, especially when you don't have AJ Brown out there. So if the Saints are scoring, which I think we have reason to believe that they will be against this Eagles defense, at least from what we've seen thus far, can the Eagles keep up?
The tougher question either way for me is the Saints, because Kubiak has clearly just, totally ambushed the first two opponents for the Saints to the point that, in my opinion, it's difficult to evaluate the way that they project over the rest of the year, because clearly I underestimated them. I underestimated the effect Kubiak would have in spite of Dennis Allen. And Dennis Allen is still, he's a good defensive coordinator, horrible head coach. He's only, Dennis Allen owes everything to Kubiak, and it's just as simple as that. So we'll see. What happened in both week 1 and 2 is that the Saints just kind of ended the game in the first 8 to 10 minutes, which is at once impressive and also, to me, it raises the question: what would occur if something other than this had happened? What if they could not clinch the game in the first 10 minutes with basically Rashid Shaheed in both weeks, just kind of doing a kill shot right away? It's possible that the Saints would just kind of have the ability to adjust and also play really well, produce really well in offense from that. But we don't know in the meantime. And as much as guys like Trevor Penning in the first round pick, Talius Fuaga, have done better than expected at tackle, including as pass blockers, they just haven't been tested, A, very much as pass blockers, and B, they haven't been tested very much as pass blockers in truly strenuous situations. So it's one thing to, he pass blocked well off the play action after Alvin Kamara had 3 touchdowns on like 9 carries or whatever, but not all games go that way. And if the conditions change, sometimes the results for those other things change too. So we haven't seen the Saints pass block against a well-rested pass rush. But the good news for the Saints here is that the Eagles have no edge rush. Their interior rush is dangerous, but Cesar Ruiz looks really good. It seems like the interior Saints line is fine. So I don't know. I don't think the Eagles are the team to suddenly be way smarter than Kubiak. Even though I don't know much about Kubiak other than who his father is. So, but with that said, it's just the Eagles don't deserve any benefit of the doubt, really. Maybe the Saints don't, but the Eagles deserve probably even less.
Yeah, I think, the Eagles, they have pretty concerning metrics through the first couple of weeks. Pressure rate, as you alluded to, near the bottom of the league. They're also, I think, giving up the most yards per carry in the league. So that seems like a pretty bad combination to hit the road with, especially going into a place like New Orleans, short week. Yeah, I think that you make a good point that the Saints are going to have to play a real game at some point, and this certainly could be a real game, but I still give the Saints the edge. I think it's still going to take a little bit of time for defensive coordinators to be able to adjust to what New Orleans is doing exactly, and I think they're going to continue to have some serious success on offense. Moving to the other end of the spectrum, as far as offensive firework potential, we've got the Steelers and the Chargers. This one in Pittsburgh. Steelers 1.5 point favorites. The over-under, a spicy 35.5.
Yeah, I can't tell where this one is going. I think we can reasonably assume the theme will be, run heavy, low tempo, and probably good play by both defenses. But I guess weird stuff happens sometimes, and in a way, I expect Justin Fields to start making some, especially as a runner, more plays than he has through the first 2 weeks. And I feel like Fields is one of those dynamic runners such that it doesn't need to be a obviously good matchup. Like, even if the Chargers defense is good, even if the Steelers offense is not good enough to project as an obvious advantage. It's so easy for Fields over, if you give him 40 carries or something, he's probably getting a 40-yard carry somewhere in there, or, not too much longer than that. So if the Chargers do anything wrong on defense, it could come at a high cost. And meanwhile, we don't know what Justin Herbert's health level is exactly. It's like between that foot injury in training camp and now this ankle thing, there's been a lot kind of pinning down Herbert in the first 2 weeks, and I think that is a concern. It's possibly going to extend into this third week and maybe even beyond that here. So yeah, basically the Chargers are not healthy enough, or the Chargers are not as healthy on offense as I would want them to be going against a defense as good as the Steelers look. And I do think the Steelers defense is going to convince people more and more over the course of the year.
Yeah, I mean, the tackle personnel has been great for the Chargers thus far, but I think TJ Watt's kind of playing at that type of level where it almost doesn't matter how, like, the Chargers are really going to have to like keep in extra help, especially if it's the rookie Joe Alt going up against Watt. Like they're going to need to keep the big personnel in. Obviously, they're comfortable with that, and they want to.
3-down guys are pretty tough too. It's like Ogunjobi, Benton, Hayward. It's a lot for it. You don't want to catch the Steelers when you don't have your act together,
Exactly. And you're a longtime Ogunjobi guy, like even dating back to when I was living in Madison, where you're still doing the XM show. Yeah. So him and is Highsmith still there too?
Yeah. He's the other
Charlotte
guy
guys
opposite Watt. Yeah.
How about it? The pride of UNC Charlotte. So yeah, not a ton of offense here, but like you said, this could set up reasonably well for Fields, and the Chargers definitely going to need to be careful going up against that defense, especially if Herbert is a little bit hampered. Before we get on to our next game, we do have a message from our pals over at Vivid Seats. NFL football is back. Gear up for the gridiron with Vivid Seats and score tickets to the biggest games of the year. Every touchdown, every tackle, and every eye-popping play for your favorite team, live and in person. And with Vivid Seats rewards, you can earn perks with every single purchase. Each ticket you buy gets you closer to your reward. Just buy 10 tickets and simply cash in your credit towards your 11th ticket purchase. It's that easy. Plus, Vivid Seats is offering you $20 off your first $200 ticket purchase with code RotoWire. That's code ROTOWIRE. From the upper deck to the front row, Vivid Seats has great tickets for all the 2024 games that matter to you. Just visit vividseats.com or download the app today. Vivid Seats, experience it live. And I will say that they have the Vivid Seats hack in the read itself. You just get a group of your pals, you buy those 10 tickets, credits right there, brother. Pretty nice. I myself can attest to that for Braves games down here in Atlanta. Also got a message from our friends at FanDuel. NFL kickoff is here, and FanDuel is giving away a special new user offer to RotoWire fans. Sign up and bet $5 on any FanDuel market and receive $200 in bonus bets, plus 3 weeks of NFL Sunday Ticket. Love Sunday Ticket. You get the red zone, you get your favorite games on. Good stuff. Visit sportsbook.fanduel.com or download FanDuel Sportsbook in the App Store today to claim this offer. All right, we're rolling along. Got a few more games to get to. We've got the Bucs and the Broncos. Everything says that the Bucs should kill them, which makes me concerned.
I wouldn't be. The Broncos don't even really have an idea of what the team is supposed to look like. Maybe Sean Payton had an idea a couple weeks ago, but it must have faded by now. He's kind of snapping out of it, but he also doesn't really know what to do about it. / there's nothing he can do about it. If this game were in Denver, maybe. I guess there's a concern for the Buccaneers offense that Surtain can limit Evans enough, and maybe Jaquan McMillan can play well enough against Godwin, plus the safeties or whatever. Maybe the Broncos can at least put a lot of pressure on guys like Jalen McMillan and Cade Otton to step up a little bit, but I think they can if it really comes down to that. Sorry, this is stupid. I got to do this. What is the latest on Rachaad White again? So limited Wednesday, he should be fine. I'm not really all that concerned, excuse me, about the low rushing yardage returns for Rachaad White. As much as the Washington defense in week 1 is bad, it's like 15 carries. It's just too small of a sample to declare anything. And the Detroit defense may well prove to be the best against the run in the league this year. So not to assume that the Denver run defense is bad, although I would kind of lean that way if I had to choose a side. I think the Buccaneers should be good enough, sound enough on offense that even if they have the worst defense of the two, it doesn't really matter when you're going against an offense like the Broncos currently have, which is plainly on pace to be one of the worst in the league's history. It's on pace to be bad by the standards of the Johnny Unitas days when it was legal to just stab a guy as a cornerback at the line of scrimmage, and it was back then numbers looked better for most teams than it has for Bo Nix and the Broncos offense through 2 weeks, and they can't run, they can't throw the ball. Sean Payton, I don't think expected it to be this difficult, and I don't think he has any idea of what to do.
I don't either. And Johnny U would thrive in today's game, although he probably wouldn't think that there's enough pass interference going on. I actually am the proud owner of a Baltimore Colts ashtray that dates back to the 70s. That's one of my favorite pieces of sports memorabilia. Let's go Packers, Titans. This one pretty up in the air right now. This is one that you're going to have to pay attention to basically until Sunday morning in the sense of what the Packers are going to do with Jordan Love. It'd obviously be a pretty quick return for him, but I believe he practiced in pads on Thursday, so that obviously would change things. The Titans, as it stands, still favored at home, so the book's still expecting Malik Willis to be under center for Green Bay, but fantasy angles from this game in your mind?
I'm kind of a hater about everything that the Titans are doing as an organization, right up to the owner. I too easily can take the side of Green Bay here. And I mean, it's an obvious fact, in my opinion, that LaFleur is about 50 times the coach that Callahan is. It's a bad look for Callahan to be yelling at Levis on the sideline like that, or he's like, "Why would you do that, Levis? Are you an idiot?" It's like, yeah, he is. Why are you acting like it's his fault? You knew who he was. Blame yourself. Point the finger at yourself. When he starts like hanging a guy out to dry in public like that, it's just, would you want to play for a coach like that? I wouldn't. I think that the Titans are not a good enough team to have, in terms of player personnel, to have a coach as unimpressive as Brian Callahan. Like he's yelling at Levis like, "You're making me look dumb in front of my dad, the offensive line coach who got me this job." I hate it. And their players just aren't good enough to make up the difference. LaFleur made Malik Willis look so good, and to Willis's credit, he did a really good job within it. Accommodated as he might have been, Willis looked like a totally different player. He looked like, for the first time in the NFL, he looked like he knew what to do, and it was it was really a contrast to everything before. So I'll take the Packers. I just don't think the Titans are a serious team. I think they're kind of in the trash, the bottom of the trash this year, bottom 5 team.
I'm so leveraged on the Titans being at least decent that I can't give up just yet. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't concerned by how this is.
They have enough good players that you have to take them seriously. But yeah, they're not going to they're never going to ascend with the people they have on hand. They're just they can kind of make it an ugly game.
And then if it is Willis, can you feel good about starting any Packers pass catcher?
No, if only because it's so tempting to take up the run that much more as Green Bay, because there's reason to think it'll work. If defenses really start selling out, trying to get Josh Jacobs in the middle of the field, just sending tons of run blitzes, that Malik Willis option or bootleg play can really make them regret it. It's like they haven't even really shown that. Malik Willis, the Liberty runner, hasn't even really been shown at the NFL level, but if someone's going to find a way to bring it out, it's LaFleur, and if it's against any particular team, I would think it'd be, against a team as poorly run, or as poorly run as I imagine the Titans to be anyway.
Yeah, not looking great thus far in Nashville. All right, game of the week, Panthers, Raiders. I think everyone wants
MVP
to.
candidate Gardner Minshew versus comeback player of the year candidate Andy Dalton.
What does the Dalton factor do for you in this one?
It's a huge upgrade, honestly. I mean, I would have been pretty hopeless for guys like Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, even Xavier Legette, who I think Xavier Legette has been a little better than I would have expected, honestly. I think week 2 was just like there was nothing at all he could do. His week 1 numbers were pretty good. And if Legette is there to space the safeties back, and if Thielen and Johnson can respectively threaten, some combination of the lateral and middle lower parts of the field, a competent quarterback should be able to do something with that, and that offensive line should be able to be leveraged in the run game. So I do think the Panthers become a suddenly, certainly not good team, but I don't know, maybe they have a chance at being the 26th best now as opposed to the definite 32nd. And the Raiders are going to keep being well coached, in my opinion. I think the resolve that the Raiders have shown is purely a reflection of Antonio Pierce, and yet another example of how pretty much every bad team in the NFL is strictly at the fault of the coach. It's just so easy for real coaches to come in and correct things, and Pierce, with basically a bunch of nobodies, has done exactly that. And Canales might be a good coach, but Pierce is definitely a good coach. And at the very least, if Canales can get Dalton to win here, that would be pretty impressive. And I think the Raiders are correctly favored by at least 5.
I can't quite get to using the Raiders in Survivor, even though I should. I feel like
I wouldn't do that. No,
it just the Dalton factor. Like if it was Bryce Young, all over the Raiders.
The X factor of Andy Dalton makes it too risky.
He threw for what, like 330 against the Seahawks in a spot start.
Yeah,
last
it took
year.
like 58 pass attempts.
It did.
Yeah, it's like the Gardner Minshew part of it, and also the Raiders have run for like 25 yards despite running it 50 times in 2 weeks. So they're a team that can win 16-10, but like that's the only way the Raiders can win.
How about my guy Brock Bowers though?
Oh yeah, he's good. He's good.
Stallion. You can see the G behind me. Finns Seahawks. Now this is one that I am interested in using a survivor play on. Seahawks favored by 4.5. Dolphins. I think I know we've seen Skylar Thompson before in the not too distant past, but I mean nothing about that was great. And I just think that this is an offense that needs a functional quarterback to reach its peak. So I think that McDonald, with the way that he schemes up that defense against an inexperienced and not overly talented quarterback, I think it's like a chess match that Mike McDaniel on the Dolphins side is going to have trouble, getting the pieces working to his advantage.
Yeah, the Seahawks quietly have probably one of the, 5, 8, 10 best front sevens in the NFL. And they can be pretty disruptive in the trenches on defense. So I would be concerned for, the Dolphins, Teron Armstead playing a little bit injured too. He wasn't even practicing yesterday. So we don't know what the status of Teron Armstead is for sure. There's a lot of questions in general about the Dolphins, and it's one of those things you don't want to have to answer so many questions at once, especially when you're dealing with changing personnel at any part of the roster, let alone at quarterback or maybe even left tackle at the same time. So I do see the Seahawks as pretty safe favorites, and if Skylar Thompson is starting, I see the Seahawks as almost the stone cold lock of the century to win the game because and probably cover whatever it is, like I don't even know what 8 or something. What is it?
It's
4.5.
It's surprisingly 4.5. Yeah.
Yeah. Give me the Seahawks by like 8. The basic problem here is Skylar Thompson is barely a Big 12 quarterback, redshirt senior, Big 12, barely viable quarterback. So in the NFL, it's just not a serious thing. It's not his fault, but Skylar Thompson should never have been so much as signed as a free agent, let alone drafted in the 7th round. And Tyler Huntley will eventually bench him, maybe even in this game. But even if that happens, and even if Huntley is an improvement, it's going to be like, that won't really bear any fruit until week 4 at the earliest for the Dolphins. So I just kind of see them getting, smothered here.
Okay, so big fantasy question from this one. It's one that I'm grappling with. It's one that I know a lot of our listeners are as well. You spent a first round pick on Tyreek Hill. You spent a late second, early third on Jalen Waddle. I mean, I think you're still starting Hill this week, but is it possible?
I'm starting both.
Okay.
Because I do expect the Dolphins to be losing at the very least, and it's not as if the Dolphins, especially with the way McDaniel, I love the guy, but he does not know how to use a backfield. He doesn't know how to manage the usage of a backfield. So I don't expect him to put forth a coherent Chip Kelly style rushing attack that's budgeted effectively and schemed effectively. It's like the scheming will be effective, the budgeting won't. And I think the Dolphins will have to throw the ball. And with guys like Waddle and Hill, it's like if they get at least 5 targets from almost any quarterback who's even been, on a training camp invite, it's pretty difficult to bench them.
All right. I'm gonna keep him in. I'm gonna keep. I got Waddle in the NFFC, and I'm scared to death. But
who's the alternative? Who's the alternative?
I think it would be like Addison, who's also sketchy for this week. So I think I got it.
Okay, if Addison's out, then we know who to pick. Then it's Waddle.
That's right. All right, hurry up offense here for the last couple of games. We got Lions Cards. 51.5 is the over under in this one. The Lions, historically, this is a kind of a betting thing, but you can use it for your fantasy game projection. When the Lions are playing in a game with an over under of 50 or more, pretty convincingly almost always goes under. So bear that in mind. This is an interesting one because for a lot of reasons. I'm really excited about this game in the afternoon window. The Cardinals, I love James Conner. I do think it's going to be really difficult for them to run on the Lions. It's going to be difficult for anyone to run on the Lions this year. So we're going to see a bigger funnel to the passing game. But Aiden Hutchinson looks like a man possessed right now. So I do have some concern about, the Cards' offensive line holding up.
Yeah, I'm a Goff hater, but I'm pretty surprised at how badly he struggled through the first 2 weeks, to the extent that even I wouldn't really predict that it continued to quite that extent. The Arizona defense is not intimidating, so even though it's on the road, it's indoors. So Goff, knock on wood, should be able to get going here. The Lions offense in general should be pretty comfortable here, and like you said, the Detroit defense is really hard to run on. So the Cardinals offense may well be good, but they tend to run through James Conner. And if he can only get so much going here, maybe it'll be tough for the Cardinals to match, the firepower of the Lions offense.
I think so as well, even with this one being played out in the desert. We got Ravens Cowboys. Quickly, what's wrong with my boys?
Yeah, it's a weird league. I think in this case, we can call the Kubiak effect the main reason why the Cowboys got lit up so badly. It was like the Cowboys flipped the week 1 and week 2 trends of themselves. Of week 1 again at Cleveland, they're supposed to play like crap in that game. They're supposed to be home field merchants and soft and afraid of the outdoors and the cold and all that. But then at home against the stupid Saints of all teams, they get completely obliterated. It's such a weird outcome. I think I'm just more so attributing it to the Saints. And in any case, Dallas's defense should be enough for what is, in my opinion, a rather badly designed Ravens offense to look pretty sluggish at best. Although I would love to be proved wrong. I'd much rather see the Ravens win this game, but I don't think they're a team that's built effectively. So I don't think it's a fair expectation of them.
Nope. Historically, bad starts to the Ravens result in bad finishes. I don't think they've ever made the playoffs after starting 0-2. So
it's hard to do.
Yeah. And yeah, even with the expanded, I feel bad about them. Let's go Rams, Niners. I suppose from this one, can anyone step up on the Rams side of things?
I really thought the 49ers would take care of the Vikings, and they did not. So maybe I'll be wrong again here, especially against a coach as good as McVay. But he's playing with an NFL Europe roster right now, Matt Stafford aside. And I don't see how it's fair. Even as a Kyron Williams basher, I wouldn't be able to criticize him if he went like 20 carries for 40 yards in this game, because the offensive line, there's so many problems on that offense.
Yeah, it's brutal. It's unfortunately shades of 2022. It's starting to feel like a little bit for the Rams. Chiefs Falcons. Illuminate me.
Yeah. I think the Chiefs are in a lot of trouble now that they don't have Isaiah Pacheco, because especially that Bengals defense was clearly, and this is why the Chiefs didn't really throw the ball very much. The Bengals were just saying, run on us. We're daring you, run the ball. And the Chiefs can take up that dare when they have a guy like Pacheco in the backfield. If you dare the Chiefs to run and they have Pacheco, you're probably going to get the worst end of it. But if you dare the Chiefs to run when they have Carson Steele, or even though I think Samaje Perine is clearly a better player than Steele, Perine, it's expired Kareem Hunt. Big drop off from Pacheco, so much less speed that after the first couple changeups surprise the defense and they calibrate to it. It's just, I could see this run game going completely cold. There's no Marquise Brown to stretch the field. I think the Chiefs are in some trouble, at least relative to where I thought they could be right now. I don't think there's any realistic hope of getting there. So the Falcons kind of suck, in my opinion, at the moment, and we'll see if Kirk Cousins kind of shakes off rust each week. That would be good to see, and they kind of need it to happen. But anything less than Kirk Cousins kind of getting back to 85% pre-injury form here, it's just hard to beat Mahomes, even if he is shorthanded.
And then moving on to the Monday night doubleheader. So Jags, Bills, and Commanders, Bengals. Give me two players you're on the lookout for from these matchups.
Well, I don't really like anyone on either of the Commanders Bengals side, so I will have to abstain. I'm sorry. And I don't like anyone on the Jags side because of Press Taylor, Doug Peterson reasons. I do think Curtis Samuel for the Bills, though, has to get going at some point. I think it's pretty clearly the case that the turf toe injury is why he hasn't played that much in the first 2 weeks. They're paying him far more than any of those other receivers. And Joe Brady was the guy who got Curtis Samuel his best season in Carolina back with Teddy Bridgewater. There's no way Joe Brady, of all people, is like, oh my God, I get Curtis on the bench and give me Matt Collins or whatever. There's just no way that's true. So I think Curtis Samuel, not to guarantee that Curtis will be more healthy in this case, but the second Curtis Samuel is more healthy, you're going to see him take off, I think.
I'd like to see that as well. I do like the Bills significantly in that game, and I do like the Bengals in the nightcap as well. Let's round it out for us here on this edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Big thanks to our sponsors over at Blue Wire, over at Underdog, over at Vivid Seats, and over at FanDuel as well. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening.